record it and you send it to me. Like,
Sounds great. Yeah. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final session of this spring's Sustainability in the Art Studio. And I thought I would start off by just speaking a little bit to the class and what it is. And Aluba's here. Wonderful. Um, so this is a class that was developed through some research that I did while pursuing a Master's of Art Education at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I partnered with my friend who started a nonprofit called the Center for Art Education Sustainability, and we sort of paired our research together to create the bones for this class. And I'm gonna send a link in the chat with just some more information about the course in case anybody's interested. And it's been a real honor to partner with ecoartspace and teach this class now for the fourth or fifth time, I think. Because the artists every single session are these like brilliant artists who are already deep in their practice and are in some way related to their work in some way considering the environment. And what we talk about in the class is basically wildcrafting art materials as a vehicle to connect to land and place. And we also take a really hard look at how our practice can consider not just our entanglement with non-human entities, but also like the human sphere as well. So thinking about how our work becomes part of living culture around us. And so the presenters who are going to present today are going to share some of their work, and the way the class is structured is information and resources are provided to the artists, but they're asked to use those resources to meet them where they're at in their practice and in their context. So so therefore everybody's work and projects are very different because they're in different places. They're working with different mediums or different communities. So I'm really excited to see where they're at in their research since we last met. And I also wanted to thank Maria Elena Pomba, Anna Mine, and Raphael Begay, who are three of our guest artists from Eco Art Space who came in and gave presentations of their work during the course. And to start off with, oh, hey, Luba, I see you're here. I was wondering if you wanted to also present today. No pressure.
Um, I don't know. Is there anything particular that, I mean, I could put stuff together, I guess. I didn't know.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were I only saw your first name, but I see now your last name. There is another artist in our class named Luba, but she's
Okay.
not here today, so no pressure. Thank you for joining
Okay.
us.
Sure.
I'm gonna throw the names in the chat of let me just make sure this is going to everybody, of our presenters in the order that they'll be going in. So we're gonna start off with Maryann.
Hello. All right, let me get to my, I need to be able to screen share.
Okay, can you maybe try again now?
Let me see if I can bring it up. Let me get to my other screen, I think. One second. There we go.
Oh, one thing I didn't mention is that at the end of each presentation, the presenters were invited to consider a couple questions to ask the audience or fellow classmates or myself for targeted feedback. So you can have a few minutes to talk about what you see. So Likewise, if you have any questions for the artist or the presenter, there will be some time to ask those at the end of the presentation.
Hi everybody. I'm going first, so I'm a little nervous, not gonna lie. So for those in the class, a little bit of this information, I look at some of the work from my past, and then I work up to what I'm currently working on. So it might be a little repetitive for you, but so one thing I was thinking about.
Maryann,
Oh,
this is Patricia.
yeah,
Your notes are
on the thing.
There you
Okay,
go.
thank you.
Yeah.
So the one thing I was thinking about is sort of how I came to be to become an artist who is more thoughtful about the environment. And it stems back from I went to grad school in 2014 at the Burren College of Art in Ireland, and where I got my MA. And I remember trying to come up with a thesis project, and the professor from SAIC had been there, and he said, you know, so what? Everybody cares about the environment. What are you going to do that's different? How can you make it more impactful? And before that time, my practice had been mostly dealing with like your feelings and making objects that weren't really, they were just objects. And so this was really a turning point for me to start thinking about my work as action, and also, of course, about the materials that that I was using. So looking back, the project that I made in 2014 in Ireland was called Crisis Farm Lab. And basically, I was looking at farming practices and interviewing local farmers, but also doing a lot of research on what was happening in natural food systems, so water, soil, and seeds. So I was making this emergency pack called the Crisis Farm Pack, and I made a garden and a shed. I built a shed in that space. And then inside the gallery area, we had I had tiny boxes where you could take a minimal amount of seeds, a small amount of soil, and a small amount of water. And they all had information about those particular topics. So about seeds, soil, and water. If you have any questions during that, I'm happy to answer. And so this is very participatory project that I made. So the audience was able to really come in and engage with the work, which is something that I really loved. And I go back to visit Ireland every year, and I'm lucky enough that there are still people there that say, oh, I remember you, you did that project. I still have things growing in my garden from the seeds that I propagated from what you gave me. So that's like so endearing and amazing. When I came back, I did a show in Philly using the same sort of idea. I was changing it up a little bit by starting to grow things in the gallery as well, and looking at sugar in foods, and then also starting to encourage people to grow their own foods. And then again, this is a show that I did after that, which is called Crisis Farm Seed to Table. And this is where we made the garden outside, I mean, a table, excuse me, outside, like a dining table. I made all the hypertufa bowls, all of the utensils, and the seeds, and we planted on an opening day. And then we did a garden inside the gallery space, which was also growing food. And then interviews with farmers I had at the table setting there, talking about what was happening in the Lancaster area with growing food. I also did some work with the local Girl Scouts, came out and helped me to do some planting. So that was really nice. And I do really love working with the community, especially kids. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well. So just some images here. And I did all the wallpaper as well. It was about how we're losing a lot of our green spaces to housing. And I had a link here that if you wanted to see more, but you can go check it out on the website. So for my project, I was looking back, I wanted to sort of revisit this idea. So I think that when the pandemic hit, like many of us, it became a bit of a shutdown. And it certainly was for me in my artistic practice. I started getting back into drawing and painting, but I wasn't really building anything or and with my own garden, I was just making, I was just growing things for myself. And Crisis Farm sort of took a back seat, and I didn't really develop it any further. And I was really disappointed in that because I think the pandemic may have been the perfect time to really explore this. But mentally, I think I sort of shut down during that period, which a lot of people did. And so with this course, it sort of sparked this idea of getting back into the idea of rebuilding Crisis Farm. And I wasn't in a position to do it in a grand way. So I wanted to take a little bit of smaller steps this time. And so I'm doing a project that is a celebration of nature and summer. And it's going to happen, so I'm not quite finished the project. It's going to happen on summer solstice. And there's going to be a celebration. Oh, why can't I go to the next slide here? Oh, there we go. So the project is I'm going to be building these small tables. This is my cardboard example, but I have the planters made. I'll show you in a second. It is a celebration of summer solstice. I'm building 5 tables for growing and eating. The number is significant that it symbolizes freedom and curiosity and change. The tables are made from salvaged materials. They are actually made from wood pallets. The planters are made from 100% recycled ocean plastic. Each individual is growing their own planter box that is going to participate in this, and we're going to have a shared meal in a local field. And I'm also sharing this. I work with an organization that's called Barnstone Art for Kids, and it's art therapy for children who have been through trauma. And so they are, I'm inviting the older students this time to come out and join us to see what we're going to do, join us in this meal. And we're also going to be planting wildflowers. Oh, there we go. Oh, let me back up. Sorry about that. There we go. Progress. All right. So I have 5 pallets that I sourced from a local foundry. It is, I've taken them completely apart, which was no small feat. If anybody's tried to take apart pallets before, it's kind of annoying. But there is a great tool for that, so I highly recommend getting one of those. And the final design was simplified from the cardboard pieces that you had seen. I went with something that was lighter, easier to travel. And I'm still thinking about how I can put wheels on these. And so this is what they look like when they're standing. They're 30 inches by 21 inches by 16 inches. They have a pocket for your plate, your silverware, probably scissors, a small vial of dressing for your salad. That we're going to be making all the boxes are filled with salad greens, radishes, tomatoes, herbs, some Swiss chard. I'm trying to remember what everybody's growing, spinach. So it's been really great trying to find people to participate in the project. I have a local craftsman. I have somebody from our green team from the borough that I live in. I have somebody that's a permaculture gardener, and I forget who the last person is. It's like slipped my mind. 1, 2, 3. I'll come up with that in a second. The seat cushions are all made from recycled materials, and the plates are actually a local potter. I talked to her, and she said she had a bunch of rejects that were just sitting around in the studio, and if I wanted them, and I was like, sure, I'll take your rejects, and they're lovely. So I love the idea of taking something that she was probably going to throw away and repurposing it. So it's from the top. This is the 5. I asked everybody to bring them in last week so I could take pictures. So this is where we're at with that. And so what do I envision for this is it's going to be held behind, it's a field behind the Barnstone Art for Kids barn. As I mentioned, they are children who have been through trauma. and they'll be invited to watch and ask questions and take part in the future. Each participant will bring their own table and grow box. Introductions will to the project will and hopeful outcome. Check in with each participant and talk about how they feel, what their expectations are for the event that we're doing. We're going to be doing some breathing exercises and taking time to sort of be quiet and off our phones. And then we'll be doing the cutting and distribution of food. So everybody's going to get a little bit from each box. Each person will bring something to read aloud to the group. It could be about whatever they'd like. And then hopefully conversation, good time happens. And then a closing conversation about the experience. It's, you know, hopefully something that is meditative and that everybody feels very good about. And then giving thanks to each other, this place, this food, and this moment. And then what's next? I hope to have a second meeting as we close out the harvest season. So hopefully in October, I'd hope to expand to more people and building more of the tables. And I'd like to create a schematic for people to build their own tables or set up a system for people to buy them from me at very low cost. All 5 tables cost me less than $100 to make, including like all of the hardware and the grow boxes. And then I hope to make this event an annual ritual and add journaling or an art element to this as well. And then what would be the best outcome? I mean, I hope that building community is probably the biggest one. I'm not going to read through all of these. Building community and opening dialogue would probably be the biggest thing that I would like to take away from this, as well as encouraging people to grow their own food. But I hope in the next one to include the mayor of our town, who's very open to things like this, and some other leaders within my borough. That's it, folks. I'm very open to questions. Sorry if I rambled super fast through that.
That was great. Do you have, I wonder, do you have any specific questions?
Do I have any? One thing is like, I don't really have a name for it, is one thing that I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm working on that one, but if anybody has any, I'm happy to take any questions. And I mean, I guess the question would be, would you want to participate in something like this? Does it sound like something that would interest you, you know, as something you'd want to do? I see a couple thumbs ups from my classmates. Thanks.
I wondered if you had a PDF or you can create one so we could build them and have little communes going on solstices.
Yeah, I'm totally working on that. I may not have it for solstice this year because it's coming up so quickly, but I definitely, for maybe the October harvest, I would definitely be able to do that. And basically one pallet, I found that one pallet was easy enough to build the table. If you have the right equipment, of course. So that's another thing. You have to have a little bit of wood tools that would happen there. So I was lucky enough, I have a planer and was able to really clean up the wood a bit because it is quite hard and dense, and getting all those nails out is annoying.
Yeah.
But doable, very doable, obviously.
I think a name would take you would really help sort of ground it as a ritual, something that people understand. Oh, I'm partaking in this thing, and understanding that it's part of a wider story that is ongoing, and it's like a seed that's being planted that has the intention to grow and keep coming back. And I love the idea.
And maybe it has something like that, like something seeds to grow or something. I'll definitely. I need to make it a little bit more cohesive in the sort of almost like the artist statement, the elevator pitch of it, you know.
Mm-hmm. If I were, just one last thing I'll say is, if I were you, I have started a number of community groups. So for example, the Creative Storytelling Collective, when we meet once a month, we gather around in a circle to share stories with each other. But the way that I first started off was, the first one was sort of an R&D mode. Like when you come together, you're sharing, you're swapping stories, but you're also sort of in the process of realizing, what is this? What are we doing? And I wouldn't undermine the intelligence that and creativity that the other participants can bring to the experience, and also reflect back to you, like, what is this experience? How is it landing with them? And then that being sort of food for thought, and like how you think of what like listening for it, what is feeding people the most about this experience, and then like pulling on those threads and how you carry the story of it forward, and how you're like shaping it, and how you're going to share it, like what lands. It's like I have a million ideas myself, but I have to test them out constantly in practice, like in practice, in community, to see like, oh, what actually sticks, though, because it's like the combination of what you want to do, what the world needs, and what you're good at. It's like the sweet spot. Crackle, did you
Yeah,
want to?
I mean, I think I am this first one, I am including people that I know. And I think that's really important for the first time as well, just so that I can sort of get a feel for it. Because I think that if I had put it up to four other complete strangers, it would have a different feel. And maybe that would be amazing as well, but just a little nervous for the first time. So I think I'm going to stick with people I know for this very first time.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I love that you're connecting it to the youth there. And it would be really also, I think, worth asking them what excites them about it, what from their observation.
Yeah, they are going to, I think I'd like to have a separate night for them to be able to do it just themselves too, because they are teenagers who have been through a lot, and it would be interesting to see them sort of off their phone and earbuds out. Like if anybody works with kids, that's tough to get the earbuds out of them. That kind of thing, where they would actually, and we've mowed out part of this field that's not being used, and we'll be planting like all of these wildflowers in there over this summer and next too. So if this grows in this way, it'd be kind of amazing to see how that field also grows, because it's not used for anything.
That's really exciting, Maryann. Crackle had a comment, and then we'll go to Rhonda, and then we'll move to our next participant.
I was wondering with the names, like you go to Ireland a lot, you've got the red hair. So I might be presuming here, but I was wondering the Celtic ancestry.
Yeah.
And in a nod to that, the 8 festivals of the year that the Celtic calendar recognizes, and you could sort of have a overarching name and then the subtitles of the festivals, because I think it's really important for shifting our perspective if we start recognizing the calendar used to work in a completely different way, as did time. And if we have a seasonality to life, there's so much more ease in introducing that, especially for kids. I think's invaluable. So I don't know how that fits for you, but it was just a thought that came up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been looking at what summer solstice means to paganism and things like that, and the Celtic culture for sure. So thank you.
You read Sharon Blackie, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she has a whole series on seasonality on her website. Where I can't remember what the course was called, but I did it years ago. So we can email and I can give you the stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rhonda.
Yeah, I have a question. That looks really nice and really fun, but it looked as though you have like one seat for each table. So each of the 5 people are sitting at separate tables. And often, we think of food as a shared experience. I'm just curious if you want to explain the symbolism of like 5 people, 5 tables, and why you don't put more people at each table.
Well, part of it is thinking about how we have really separated ourselves during the pandemic, and everybody was very individualized. And I think that that was part of it. And then the other part is I want people to be able to take these home and use them at home in their own way. So whether you are able to sit outside and enjoy a meal by yourself, or you're able to make artwork in that space on that table sitting outside, or whatever you may, maybe kids want to use it as a desk. I don't know. But I think that it was for people to be able to have them separate, but then come together.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Maryann, you might also want to take a look at the chat. There's a couple of comments from Patricia.
Okay.
I think you should check out.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I just
Yeah. Oh, you went on mute.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, I loved your dining table, the long dining table with the garden in the center, and it reminded me of Judy Chicago's The Dinner Table, and wondered if you had reflected on that, you know, different components, of course, on each plate, but it was a great visual, and I just wanted to mention that it was inspiring. I liked it a lot. I thought that was very cool.
I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I mean, of course, you can't help but be influenced by Judy Chicago, right? She's amazing. But I think that when I was making this, I was really thinking about the audience that was going to be there at that time, and really trying to hit home this farm to table sort of experience. So where you could literally sit around the table, and that table is still active, or activated, I should say, at the gallery that it showed at back in 2015 or 16. And they still use it today to grow things. And I just love that it has remained. So, yeah.
That's cool. Maybe you'll have the longevity that Walter de Maria had with the Earth Room, you know, in New York City. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. I'll look that one up.
That's, if you happen to be in New York, you definitely have to see it. The Earth Room. I think it's on Mercer Street in Soho.
Yeah.
And that's
How have
been
I
there
not?
since like 1970.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say about that. It's full of dirt. That's it. That's
Gotcha.
it. Anyway, thank you. It was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. And then we'll go on to Crackle.
Right. I just wonder if you thought about preserving food that you've grown, and whether that could be a follow through up during times when growing isn't happening.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I'd have to definitely learn how to do some canning. I don't know that. I'd have to learn. It's definitely something I've thought about learning for sure.
And drying food, you know.
Yeah. Well, I have a dehydrator, so I do dry food, but I eat it right away. But that's a great idea. Thanks, Zea. I appreciate that.
Quick round of applause for Maryann. Crackle, do you want to begin your presentation?
Yeah, let me see if I can get this to work. Okay. Can you see my screen now, everyone?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can see it.
Let me move this thing. I joined the class because a really good friend of mine took it last time around, and I was just intrigued with where everybody had gone in their making. And Elizabeth Stone has always been a kind inspiration to me since I got to America. And so I joined with interest, and I was home in New Zealand, and I didn't have much making materials with me. And it's really made me start to think about how to expand my practice into greener ways and what's on hand. So I'm trying to finish up everything I have in my studio, and I think I'm moving more and more away from using a printer, a tool. And it's just been a really great journey watching all these different ways of going forward. And before I started, I was already committed to a show in August, and that's based around this idea of solophilia. And so I have all these ideas to go on to make with that come from the class, but I have to finish what I've got going now. So that's where I'm at. Solophilia is a term that Glenn Albright, who's Australian, came up with. He wrote a book in 2019, which is New Words for New World, Earth Emotion. And solastalgia is the emotional and existential distress caused by environmental climate change. It involves a lot of grief, and I know DM's on this call, and she's done some beautiful work around the grief. And I personally have had a lot of grief in my life in the last 6 years, and I really have been working my way through to finding more joy on the other side, letting the grief transform me. So I really like the term soliphilia, which flips the coin to one of hope. And it looks at how we can combine a love of place with responsibility for protection and conservation. So this show I have in August is a collaboration I've been doing with a friend from Maine, and it's accumulates in August. So we've been working on it for a year. And the whole show is based around the idea that it's kind of like the oxygen mask. If you don't administer self-aid, you're no good to anybody. So we've built the framework around the idea of a first aid kit. And really, we're looking to hopefully give people clues on how to cut the external noise and encourage them to find their way forward in the world, tuning in more to how they feel rather than the outer anxiety and noise, especially regarding the climate change. I believe by pausing, that, like Sharon Blackie wrote, we can understand our dysfunctional ways of being and confront the beliefs and values we subscribe to, which have caused both women and men in the planet to be in a mess, and to find an authentic way forward to being and our values, our creative power and the vision. So for that to happen, we need to examine ourselves and the world we live in and change ourselves, so we can then look at the outer world and step forward and heal the earth and act as a guardian and protector. So our project is going to involve our audience a lot. When when I talked to Anna for 5 minutes, it turned into nearly an hour, because we've got a lot of similar ideas. Like, we're going to have weaving, and we have chairs and checklists and all kinds of tactile ways to engage the audience during the show. But how we've built the show is we've each month picked a word and then held that word and written about it and made around the world. And now we're pulling things together. And these are just some of the things that we're going to be putting into the show. So I'm just going to skip forward, because really it was mapping that for me pulled together the class and so much of what's been going on in my head, which has been how to manifest a piece that can illustrate how the noise that I've been unaware of in myself has been affecting how I live my life, how it's affected my belief systems and eroded my true sense of self. And in a way, being a part of society, it kind of can, if you think a little different to other people, I find it's killed my confidence and some of my dreams. And it feels very risky sometimes to leave that view behind and step forward into what I believe is my truth. During 2020, I think this is when Eve Ensler wrote this about disaster patriarchy. I was also finishing an MFA at Maine Media at this time. And so there's been a lot going on in the old melting pot of my brain. But disaster patriarchy is basically the suppression of women. And, you know, Naomi Klein identified disaster capitalism, which is when measures are imposed that couldn't possibly be gotten away with in normal times, that generates more profit for themselves. And disaster patriarchy is similar. Men exploit the crisis to reassert control and dominance. And it's just been, if I can take the emotion away, fascinating to watch the push-pull. And, you know, you look back in time and you look at the witch hunts and everything. It was when Christianity and the patriarchy were really stepping forward. And we lost a lot of what was important in the world, I think. The old world, the preservation of the world, respecting Mother Nature and everything. So really the class has led me into thinking about a new series called Internal Geographies. And one of the factors I will look at is topography. And those are the things that come into us that encourage and light us up and make us think about things. And here are some of the pieces for me: artists, poets, books, music, other influences. And so I'm hoping to somehow encourage other people to sort of make their own topographies and think about things that influence them. Wayfinding is a really interesting practice. It's the ancient Polynesian practice of navigating oceans just using stars, waves, celestial bodies in the skies, the winds. It's how the ancient peoples from Hawaii Kiki found my homeland, New Zealand. And now I did a year-long life coaching class with Martha Beck, and it was called Wayfinding. And it's basically about how to follow your inner compass back to your true, authentic self, your true north, clear of cultural messages and the societal pressures and family ties we each find. So all of this has been going on in my mind as I've been taking the class. And, you know, some of the reading I've done has been influenced by Paul Hawkins, who puts the interconnectedness of all beings and ecosystems at the center of everything, and Robin Wall-Kimmerer, and indigenous cultures. I think we as a Western culture could really learn a lot from looking back to how others guarded the natural world and worked with it. So I've really thought about how can we find hope out of the climate crisis, spin the lens away from misogyny, loss, disparity, differences, and disconnection. One of the most essential choices I can do is ask myself the question, what's my most peaceful choice right now? And that isn't passive. Sometimes that means pushing back. And also, for me, it's also what lens am I viewing the world through? Am I being a victim a bit, saying this happened to me, or am I looking at it like this happened for me? I'm either winning or learning. So my recipe that I've come up with is you feed your soul, incite your magic, and embrace your power. Learn to be unapologetic in your authentic self and really consider what vibration, energy are you putting out in the world. And the more I've turned towards the hope lens, the more things have been coming towards me. I don't know if people follow Substack, but Elizabeth Gilbert's on there, and she started a beautiful practice in September that came from the Artist's Way, which is writing a love letter to yourself. And it's just amazing. The divine is within all of us. So I decided I'd build a new blueprint for myself. And literally that meant taking a giant cyanotype sheet and printing on it and building on it, and thinking about what kind of things would go into a blueprint. So instead of a manifesto, I wrote myself a woo manifesto, which is a statement for self-expression and a guide for pillars of support and grounding. I've envisaged, what do I want my life to look like? How to create a life. And this was inspired by a chapter in Poe Bronson's book. I can't remember what the book was called, but one of his interviewees wrote about, I've created a life where, and so I went down in that rabbit hole. And then I believe my work has really been influenced by the divine feminine, and Hecate is an amazing goddess. She's queen of the witches and is strongly associated with the eternal wild woman. And by looking at her, it reminds me to acknowledge there's no separation between ourselves and the divine. And also that there's no time for playing nice, playing small, being compliant, courteous, and in servitude. Instead, I feel like it's time for me to honor the powerful, sacred feminine, as that restores me to myself. So here is where I started with my blueprint, and it got a little smudged because as I was lying there in the sun, I could feel this tickling, and I looked out and I got covered in ants. And it's kind of ironic because there's this shadow self, and it's kind of cool to me now because it kind of represents the, you know, I believe when we arrive, we come here from source and we get disconnected. So there's the trying to realign. So I kind of like the symbolism of that. And in the center of the self, I've stitched by hand all the symbols that are tied to the goddess Hecate. And I love this quote by Mary Oliver, because as you stitch, you know, it is transformative, it's calming, it reduces anxiety for me. And it reminds me of the power of attention, how much can be obtained and contained in the small moments. So also going onto this giant sheet is a compass rose to remind me to orientate to my true North Star. I've stitched a North Star to remind myself to align to my authentic self and my values and bring those gifts to the world, and to love and accept myself even if I think a little wonky compared to many people. I've stitched a sort of protective eye, the visionary symbol, which is to remind me especially to look after all the parts of myself that oftentimes I abandon to fit in. Around the compass rose, I've stitched these different symbols. This one's the portal to the unknown, which encourages me not to play it safe. And then to remember, you know, sometimes when we risk the most, we're surprised the most. And when it feels really scary, often we're met with an audience that connect with us and expand us into a new truth. Then there's the scarab of abundance, to remember and enjoy the gratitude for all the earth's beautiful gifts. And the Orobus of transformation, to remember to embrace change and trust in the unknown. And so that's what it now looks like on the sheet, all of those elements together. I'm going to add a tui, which is my favorite, one of my favorite birds at home. And the tuis are associated in Maori culture with life fulfillment, confidence, and spiritual harmony. So it's kind of like I'm building this big protective talisman, and it's been so exciting and liberating. It might not resonate to other people, but for me, it's just been so freeing. It's amazing. I'm also going to stitch plant medicines to acknowledge the ancient wisdom keepers and the healing properties of plants. And on this sketch, I've got the iris, which is recognized as for love and external hope. The mandrake for healing, borage for courage, the thistle for boundaries and protection, and snapdragons were used to block negative energy. So here's the work in progress now. And one person I want to acknowledge is Christy Johnson, who wrote this book, Mystical Stitches, because I've been trying to stitch, and during the pandemic, I'd had a community online that came together and we cross-stitched all the state flowers, but it just didn't ring true. And this book just freed something up in me. And she said you're free to use any of my symbols. So I've started with some of those, and I really look forward to now going forward and developing my own. So yeah, that's where I got to, and I'm excited now to start dyeing fabrics and moving forward with that and seeing what happens. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Crackle. I'm reminded, do you know of an artist, I think she's Australian, named Sarah Waters? So I wonder if okay, I'm gonna find an article for you that feels so connected to your practice. And Patricia's wondering if you are using natural dyes.
I have just begun. My husband really thinks I'm a witch now because I'm out there bubbling away my little cruise. But I didn't have time. I knew I couldn't go down that rabbit hole before this show because there's so many other moving pieces in it. But I even planted marigolds to be able to harvest my own marigolds. And back home, we have a lot of eucalyptus. So I'm really looking forward to dyeing with eucalyptus.
I feel really moved by the impact that this process and practice is having on yourself, and how there's like a healing component to this, because I know we've discussed one-on-one the sort of intense amount of grief that you're also like wading through in the recent years, and I can see this transformational like shift that's happening in you and how almost like it's sort of like thorns and then buds, but then the rose is starting to happen. And I wonder, while like the practice, the ritual of this like serves its own, it's worthwhile just for the impact that it's having in your own personal sphere. But I also wonder because you are bringing it into the collective, you're showing this work, and I wonder like how you might tell this story, because you won't be on a Zoom screen, right, in the gallery space. So how do you tell and share this story there? Like, are there sessions that you might host and say, like, at this hour, like I will be here to tell this story of this cloak or this this embroidery. And I just would think that for others who may be going through similar processes that life throws at us, it's sort of inherent part of being in life is grief and loss and finding, right? That it would be impactful and meaningful for others to hear your story and how this like lands for you. Because it strikes me as one of my favorite this place-based theater collective in Massachusetts called the Royal Frog Ballet. There's this one amazing painter who is the artist for them, the visual artist, and she creates these massive they're paintings on canvas, but they'll sort of hold them up. All of their plays take place outdoors and as the sun is setting and they have it's similar to your piece where there are all these different symbols around. And she would tell the story by the sun was setting and she would have a flashlight and she would go from here to here. Like in the Zoom function, you are showing us like one piece at a time. So you can really digest these moments, right? But how do you tell that story like in a gallery space? I wonder how you could possibly get creative about that. But yeah, that's just a couple of 2 cents for me. And thank you so much for sharing.
Well, I think that I'm going to be giving an artist talk, so I'll be able to do it. And my collaborator is meant to be doing a blueprint. But also one of the goals at the end of the show, because there's going to be so many different places where people can put input, is I make a lot of handmade books and I really love to write. So I'm thinking that there'll be a book form, but I'm also wondering how to create like a zine or something that people could go away and it's like their medicine from this. You know, there's going to be different places. And so it's questions to consider to map your way forward. And so I'm playing with that. It's bubbling still. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I know you talked too about wanting to possibly facilitate this practice for others and guiding others in this wayfinding practice. So that would be a really great opportunity to start exploring what that could look like moving into that modality of like facilitating this work with others.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of exciting to think of a group, small groups, because big groups get overwhelming, but small. Yeah.
Start small. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Crackle.
Thank you.
Clap, clap, clap. And next we have Z. Where did Z?
Hi, I think I can share my screen. I tried it out.
Awesome. You should have the you should be able to.
Let's see. I just did it before, so see if I can find it.
If you look at the oh yeah, there you go. Nice.
Yeah, okay, whoops. There we go. Wait, sorry. What I'm not seeing is my own screen. So
We can see it.
okay, as long as you can see it.
Yeah.
My project is parking lot trees. And it's going to be a book. I'll probably use a laser printer or an inkjet printer and then hand bind the pages in a small edition. And the slideshow will be it's just the pages from the book, basically. And that's the truth of it. Thanks to Joni Mitchell. Here are my disclaimers about the project. It's first of all, it's not finished. Secondly, it utilizes technology that is not sustainable and is probably harmful to other living beings. And the other disclaimers, it's not a photo book because I'm not a photographer. So these photos are going to be pretty lame. And it's not even about trees or about parking lots either. It's about how we humans choose to live increasingly on the pavement within the confines of a city or a town, and the consequences of this lifestyle choice on our planet, on the biosphere. And parking lot trees are a symptom. They are in our face every day, and yet they are invisible. I live in Inverness, which is about 50 miles north of San Francisco on the Point Reyes Peninsula. It's a small village, and more than one person coming to visit me says, I love being out in nature. And yes, you know, it's beautiful, but nature is a very general term. It could mean a lot of things. But what I think is being said is I love being off the pavement, where it is green, where the wild things are, or even I love being in wilderness, which is, of course, an impossible ideal. I mean, from my point of view, I'm living in the countryside. I'm living where a landscape has actually been shaped and maintained by people making a living on it. You know, farming, ranching, logging, mining, even catering to tourists. And of course, before Europeans came, what was happening was the Coast Miwok were harvesting acorns. They were fishing for shellfish and leaving their shell mounds, and they were burning the understory. I mean, it was beneficial, but it was still an altered landscape. So this is something that what I see is that my friends feel almost uncomfortable in what they consider wilderness, and which I see is an actually a made landscape. I'm fortunate that our house borders on undeveloped land, so I actually get to see trees living in a wilder state than most. But I'd also point out that forest bathing, as far as I understand it, is kind of a similar thing in that people who live on the pavement all the time need to return to places where things grow freely. And unfortunately, it's also a practice that is about benefiting us and not necessarily benefiting them, the wild things. Parking lot trees are meant to offer shade, and they brief respite from the ever-expanding pavement. But if you start looking at parking lots, what you see is you can't avoid a kind of sad recognition that these things growing out of the earth are poorly acknowledged hostages to our lifestyle. For our convenience, the parking lot is built. The earth is sealed for our cars to drive over and for our comfort. And against this barren pavement, and to make up for all that we have lost, shade trees are planted. And, you know, some of them are really shameful in the way that they're neglected and etc. Others are better. But as you can see, they're still dangerously isolated from the rest of the world that they belong to. I was kind of researching parking lots online, and here's a brochure, kind of lines it out very straightforwardly for the advertising landscaping services. Here's some tree that is escaping from its confines. Here's the brochure. Many of the urban challenges that trees face begin with the construction process. At the beginning of parking lot construction, tree-loving topsoil is typically removed. The subgrade is then compacted, followed by layers of crushed stone, then asphalt or concrete that's spread and compacted. The resulting soil mix under the pavement is hardly root-friendly and has very low oxygen. Paved surfaces are engineered to quickly shed water, often in directions that either deprive trees of adequate soil moisture or leave their roots submerged in excess water. The sun really bakes parking lots and other pavements, and it's made even worse by reflecting off adjacent buildings and cars. Now, the benefits of trees in paved areas: nothing breaks up a big expanse of pavement like pretty shade trees. Adding trees in and around parking lots and pavement improves appearance, prevents soil erosion, adds oxygen to the environment. Planting areas also reduce stormwater drainage problems, buffer wind and noise, and make passersby and parking customers happy by providing cool shade. The good thing is that cities like Sacramento are mandating green plantings, even if only to provide humans with relief from climate extremes. But ultimately, the survival of all beings. If we're going to take that seriously, we need to change our point of view, right? So here's my bibliography for my book. It started with Joseph Beuys' What is Art?, where he advocates for simply looking at your environment with a creative eye, which I think is really important. I mean, otherwise, how would I have ever thought about parking lot trees? Donna Haraway, Staying with the Trouble, which is about how to get along with other beings that aren't human on Earth in a positive way. And Suzanne Simard, Finding the Mother Trees, like just an amazing book. Can't recommend it enough. Showing the interconnectedness of forests. It's just unbelievable. And of course, Ed Ruscha, 26 gasoline stations, because that's kind of the way I look at these parking lot images, is, just dead on accounting for what's in our environment. This is what's in my environment, of course. So there's the tree that sparked the whole thing. I was in a parking lot and I saw each tree in the parking lot had a nailed in tag. Kind of reminded me of the dog tag that I have on my dog when I was walking her there. So that's been my project.
Thank you, Zea.
Welcome. I'm trying to unshare my screen now.
Oh, you did. You're great.
Okay, good.
I appreciate how sort of pervasive and fundamental to probably everyone on this call, their experiences in our terrain, our landscapes of seeing trees in parking lots. And it was really cool to hear. I want to read that boys article or book, because I think there's really something there about recognizing how do we intervene, how do we interrupt business as usual. And it starts sort of by recognizing our environments around us, the ways that we're sort of conditioned to just take these things as normal, and really start questioning them and thinking about this in more critical ways. There's a comment in the chat by Jean. Jean, would you like to read your comment?
I don't see it.
I can read it aloud too.
With all your disclaimers, I love that you focused on the parking lot trees, which I think about every time I park my car. And I wonder how these deers get their water, these deer things, and who's responsible for providing that, and what's going on under the tarmac or concrete or pavement. Are they connecting with their helpful fungi underground and other trees' roots? I don't know if you know more about that aspect of parking lot trees as of yet.
I don't. What I see is that trees that are planted in a whole little mini environment, often surrounding the parking lot, seem to have a better relationship with each other, because they probably can connect. But the difference between these spindly, suffering trees and what you see in a forest is so great. I don't see how they can possibly have after what's done to the soil. I don't, it would probably take a very long time to reconstruct, for the trees to reconstruct the density of life forms in the soil around them. I just don't see how it can happen, really.
And at the same time, what also comes to mind for me is thinking about the ways that the ecosystem will start to reclaim abandoned parking lots. Like, for example, in Cleveland, Ohio, there was this massive amusement park that was like decommissioned, shut down over 10 years ago now. And there was just a parking lot the size of a football field, if not larger. And now when you drive past it, it's just wild the way that you can barely see any pavement anymore. It's just completely, I mean, it's
Right.
still quite flat, but it's just really being taken back into the earth. It's a slow process. But yeah, it's just interesting to think of that phase of our paving paradise and putting down a parking lot, and then what, like, the cycle of life of that endeavor, and the inevitable downfall of our attempts to keep it clean and sealed.
Yes. If there are enough people around to care for it, also, it would help. I mean, why do we have to keep building parking lots? You know what I mean? Can the wild reclaiming balance the ever increasing paving? That's something to think about.
It reminds me a little bit too of, I'm going to throw this in the chat, a project that an old mentor of mine started called the Metabolic Studio in LA. And they're doing some really interesting stuff with sort of with they're working with on sort of a riverbed, but they're also on this site that's just what is and was just sealed concrete, and the way they're transforming that space is just really cool. So I'm going to put the Metabolic Studio in the chat, and Patricia also threw some comments in the chat that I would encourage you to record or write down to look up later. Burned and Hilla Becker water towers. And there's a movement of taking out the cement, unmaking, undevelopment. I love that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you so much, Zea. Awesome to have you in class. Okay, and last but not least, we have Rachel.
Alrighty, let me share my screen.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Patricia.
All right, can everyone see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my title is Bruises, a Flower's Reality. And so here's an intro to my thoughts for starting this project. I wanted to, well, I guess I'll preface it by saying that I work in a high-end flower shop. And so the standard of like the caliber of our products is really high. And so there's a lot of waste generated because perfection uh is what we have as our standard. And so I wanted to focus on that for this project. So all of the waste that's generated and how imperfections lead to disposable thinking and how trash can be transformed to have new meaning, in addition to generating some color from decaying flowers that would have otherwise just been sent to a landfill. Here's a photo of one of the many industrial sized trash cans that we fill up each day. And this includes organic material, paper, plastic, and rubber. And so none of these things are separated or recycled. It's all just thrown in these bags together. I also noticed that, as you can see in this photo, the trash is consisted mostly of leaves and stems, and greenery is less expensive compared to traditional flowers that we use. So since it's not as valuable, and I also noticed it's not as valuable of a color as well, we throw out most of this organic material. Okay, so here's a photo of some flowers with imperfections that I pulled out of the trash can. So these flowers have snapped heads, split leaves, or bruised petals. And bruising means that there is like a permanent indent in the in like the structure, and so there's a discoloration of the petal. So for the rest of the flowers, though, the color quality is still there, as you can see, because it is fresh from being like in its original form. But the structural integrity or perfectness are not like still there. So I wanted to define the word perfect in this as the ability to replicate a fresh, untouched flower grown in nature to peak bloom. So now I wanted to create new meaning for these flowers that would have gone to waste. And you can see all of these flowers that are starting to decay. And this is trash flowers 24 hours after being removed from the garbage. I took this and then did some sampling of their natural pigments. So I was inspired by the green marks left on the floor of our shop after stepping on discarded leaves that didn't make it quite into the trash can. And the flowers would also stain our hands and clothes. I was also intrigued to see how potent the colors were. And after 24 hours, the pigments were more concentrated because they were starting to decay. And I think that the pigments started like aggregating in certain areas. The strategy was to pinch flowers between my fingers and rub them into watercolor paper. This proved extremely effective, but it bruised the petals beyond repair. And so here are those same flowers put next to their samples, and you can see that they are destroyed. Then I wanted to investigate a little bit of the chemical structure of these organic compounds, and the red pigments, red or pink is cyanidin, pelargonidin is the red or orange, and then delphinidin is the blue and violet. And what was interesting is I noticed that since we work with delphinium a lot, which is the purple flower you can see on the bottom row, I realized that the the flower name is nearly identical to the chemical compound. The same thing with geraniums to the left of that. After that, my next steps were to experiment with different methods of color transfer and try various types of mark making in another sample format. I also wanted to combine the knowledge, these knowledges to craft an art piece using flower pigments of collected trash flowers. My guiding question for this first step is, how can flower pigments be extracted to transfer to paper in their richest forms? So I wanted to do a little bit of an investigation here. And first I wanted to see if steeping the petals would produce more of the color outcome that I desired. So I boiled water and then I let the petals steep to see if they were concentrated enough to kind of use as like uh, water that I can put into the watercolor paper and hopefully stain it. So I found out a few things. The first is that most of the petals were bleached from the temperature of the water, resulting in no pigment left. And that's the top photo you can see there. So those were originally bright pink, but you can see that the water is essentially clear. However, the red petals turned water blue and then pink. So on the bottom row, the bright red rose petals, it was really interesting. The water is blue that it started with, and then like a half hour later it turned pink, and that's the photo directly to the right. And I also found that the black anthers, which carried pollen, turned water greenish blue. So that's the little cup above the red flower. And then I also found after that, that after a few hours, the pigment was gone in the bowl. So what you see now, it just turned clear. And I concluded that maintaining as much of the flower's original composition as possible yields more reliable results. So then I wanted to do a second test, and this is manual mark making. And for my first trial, I didn't really have like a specific composition that I was going for. I was just rubbing the flowers on the pages very vigorously just to see what would happen. And then I did a similar test to my original test with the swatches, and I wanted to see how different types of pressure would transfer the pigments. So you can see a really interesting like an interesting situation on the right in that photo. So my findings were that the impression with my nail yielded more pigmented results, followed by rubbing and then rolling the petals across the paper. So on the top left corner, you could see the impression with my nail. And I also calculated, or not calculated, but I categorized the water content of each sample of the organic material that I used. So you could see that the stems have a low water content as indicated by the arrow. And I was rubbing that pretty vigorously. That didn't really show up too well. And you can see also that the rose petal that I used on the row below it with the pink, even though I was putting heavy pressure, it still didn't show up that well. And then the light pressure rub, there's nearly no payoff. So I found that that my nail impressions stamped the color into the page and did not allow it to be moved. So I tried to use water to shift around the color and like create more of a like watercolor effect, but it was interesting they did not move or be transferred. I also found that water content typically does not result in high pigment payoff. However, there was one exception. So the exception was the high pigment Freedom Rose, which is the bright red rose. And that showed very high pigment, as you can see. The yellow pigments also showed up more than pinks and purples. So on the very bottom row, that was used by a purple calla lily, and that is like it's almost the same color as the payoff from the Freedom Rose up at the top. But this, you can see, since the water content was really high, it just drowned out all of the pigment basically in there. And then I also found that pollen shows up brightly due to its high powder content. And since it's dry and it has it's just easy to like rub into the paper and really stamp in as well. So I concluded that forceful pressure in combination with yellow, green, and red pigments produce the most clear results. And then as a second follow-up test, I wanted to create a piece, but I wanted to have I had an intention behind it. So I wanted to combine my experimentation with application. So I had a new set of flowers that day, and I picked out the purple, yellow, and green flowers, and then I used those to make this piece you can see on the right. And my final piece analysis is I wanted to represent movement as a main emotion of my piece, the movement of a flower through its life cycle to its ultimate destination. I aspired to create marks of its life to capture its beauty as I intentionally destroy the petals and leaves. The experience was rather macabre because it allowed me to sit with the duality of life and death through remembrance. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
I wonder, because last time we talked, I was mentioning the light fastness of flowers, how they're not like rich with tannins, so they're likely to fade. If you did any light test experiments or how you feel about the fading of the color that might be inevitable.
Yeah, so these tests, I want to continue and have that as an element. But right now, I just focused on like the original pigments, and then I closed the book and put it in a dark place. But over time, I talked with like my thesis advisor, which is who is the person who recommended this course to me, and she was saying to create a process book and have all the experiments lined up in there. And so the boiling and then just like the manual like rubbing of the petals were the first two, but those are ongoing. So I think the light test is a good idea as well.
And you could also incorporate the fading as an intentional part, like being with that process and thinking about the life cycle and the endings of things, of plants and yeah, just being with that intentionally. Rhonda's got her hand up.
Yeah, if you're open to putting this on cloth and not just paper, I've done a lot of experiments with flowers from my garden. And you take just any kind of cloth, cotton cloth, and then treat it with a mordant. If you read up on plant dyes, there's a lot of different chemicals that can be used as mordants, and some are more toxic, some are less toxic. So you soak the cloth in the mordant first, and you wrap the cloth around the flowers, like that third example you showed us. And then you just put it in a jar outside, kind of like making sun tea. And then in 24 hours, it's amazing what you can see on that cloth. So you could play around with different mordants pull out different colors from each individual flower. And maybe you could even use the mordant on the paper, and that would increase the light fastness properties too. So
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. I'll have to try that out.
Yeah, Rachel, there were a couple of comments in the chat. One was to consider if you wanted to have the flowers be part of the practice more longer term than short term, thinking about the way the colors will fade with the inks you're using, you could consider bundle dyeing or steam dyeing. Like Rhonda was saying, I think I could actually see you getting really into dyeing because you have a very scientific, like analytical approach in the way that you are moving through these steps. And dyeing, there are a lot of steps and there's like so many different facets to it to record and understand about it. It's quite complex, but you can also do it intuitively. But I would definitely consider that as an option. And when you are when you set a fabric with a mordant, when the color meets the fabric after it's been prepared with a mordant, it's a permanent bind. So the color will then be permanently adhered to that fabric. So that could be an exciting way to explore the colors from your flowers. And one other thing you might want to consider is I've seen a lot of people make paper, which can be making paper can be done in really complex ways or really simple ways, just with like a blender and a screen. But I've seen people will put flower petals, they'll layer petals in with the pulp. And that's another way that you could sort of preserve the flower and have it be part of an artwork. And I threw some pictures in the chat just of examples. But I think there's maybe some resources in our Google Drive on those, but you can also just like Google, steam bundle flowers, dyeing fabrics, and you want to use natural fabrics like silk. Silk is what I've done it with before, but maybe I think cotton could be good too.
Mm.
And there's another comment for you in the chat. I have a suggestion for fixing the color or powder from the pollen, perhaps the pastel drawing spray fixative. This might work. So something else to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all really interesting things I can follow through with and take the paper to either like create my own or take it to, like you said, the other types of fibers.
Yeah. And if you're interested in, continuing to explore sustainability and your and your job, that their environment, you could connect that. You could in Cleveland, we have some really cool rock and roll composting, like grassroots composting networks here called Breast Belt Riders. It would be, it's just wild to me that, I mean, connecting all of this greenery that's going into the trash, if that could be connected into a compost loop, that would be so awesome. But that's like
Yeah.
a big undertaking.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought about that. It's just like I haven't even worked there for a year yet, so I don't want to be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like you should do this, and like who are you to say that?
Yeah.
But that definitely would be awesome to follow through with.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me, I was listening to, I'm trying to remember who this artist was. It was somebody I met alongside Lauren Bond, who started Metabolic Studio, but this artist was talking about how before they do large scale work in communities, like environmental art pieces, but that incorporate communities and connecting with their land and revitalizing really sort of desolate landscapes and by introducing new plant life and in these areas. But the first step to any project she does, she was sharing, is she will go and just go sit in on town meetings, go join local community groups, and just sit there silent for like a year, just listening, like what is going on here before coming up with devising a plan and then like co-hatching it with the people. And so she's really embedded in these communities. So anyways, your comment just made me think of that. But yeah, it's been so great to have you all in this class. I very much hope that you stay in touch. Every time I teach this class, it's just a phenomenal group. And I still have some plan, and I would still love to find a way to connect like present presenters with past presenters and just keep the threads ongoing. Find some like network that can be generated somehow, but we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for all. Thank you all so much for being here today. Those who were in the class and who are just here to listen in. Your presence it was just great to have you, and for your comments. And thank you so much, Patricia, for hosting us and for the opportunity to keep teaching this class, and for all the work that you do at ecoartspace. Oh, you're on mute.
No, I want to thank you because, yeah, this is like the 5th session, this last one, right?
It might be.
And we'll be doing it again in the fall. So, and I know there's some people here today that are interested in signing up already. So yeah, there's been a great amount of interest. Everybody's happy who does it. I think it's a great value. I think Anna is great at what she does and goes beyond probably just any other course, to really take time with you guys. So I'm glad that everyone feels like they're getting something out of it. And yeah, we'll do more.
And one last thing I want to say is that the Google Drive that we have with like the folders of folders, you guys have unlimited access to all of the resources. But that one in particular is one that I'm hoping to keep budding. So if you do come across any new content that you want to share, throw it in those folders, because future participants will continue adding to those folders, and past participants are always welcome to keep contributing to them. So my hope is for that to be an ongoing library of resources. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to talking again soon, seeing how everything continues to unfold. Bye, everybody. Bye, Patricia.
Bye. Thanks everybody for being so generous today, sharing.
Stay in touch.